Hello and welcome to the Good Stories Podcast. I'm Jody, back again with my brother Stephen. Today, I'm delighted to say that we get to talk about the great C.S. Lewis, or Jack to his friends. A brilliant writer with amazing stories. He wrote extensively and was in large part a storyteller, as he gave us beautiful stories like the Chronicles of Narnia. But he also wrote deep reflections on faith and theology, like Mere Christianity and the Screwtape Letters. There's a book written about him called C.S. Lewis, the Apostle to the Skeptics. That description was applied a long time before Lewis to the Apostle Paul in the Bible, but it fits so well with Lewis's work in Christian apologetics. And because Lewis was a skeptic himself before coming to faith as an adult, he went in dragging his feet, describing himself as, quote, the most dejected and reluctant convert in all England, but then went on to write his own testimony and called it Surprised by Joy. And something I learned about him and really love about the man was that particularly early in his career, or when he was editing someone else's writing, he would sometimes use pseudonyms instead of his own name. And the best part, he used different ones for different purposes, like Clive Hamilton, which is his first name, mixed with his mother's maiden name, for a degree of anonymity for some earlier writings of his, and then also N.W. Clerk, meaning anonymous clerk, even though then he was writing about his own personal story of grief and loss. Or the acronym TFT, thought to mean something like Tertius Filius, or the third son. So, brother, what do you think of C.S. Lewis? This is our first real time talking about him.
He is, of all the authors that I could ever meet, given the choice, C.S. Lewis or Jack, which is what he went by, is who I would pick. He's a hero of mine. He is the one. A close second on that is J.R.R. Tolkien, of course, but Jack, I think, would be a much more enjoyable conversation. And again, if I had my preference, it would obviously be both of them together. So
Sure.
I am so excited to talk about this book. I'm excited to talk about Jack. I'm a little intimidated, though, because I am such a fan that I want to do him justice with this, because we are talking about not only one of my favorite authors, but we are talking about my favorite book by that author.
So you're geeking out right now.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I just mentioned a couple little things that I know about him. Tell me more.
So Clive Staples Lewis. Yes, Clive Staples Lewis. At the beginning of one of his Narnia books, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, he talks about a character named Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. I always felt that kind of applied to C.S. Lewis a little bit. As a young man born in 1898, he was a bit of a precocious little punk growing up. I mean, when you read through his letters, a bit snarky, a bit interesting in the way he wrote about things, but then he developed into the author that we all know and love. Converted to Christianity a little bit later in life.
In his 30s.
Yeah, absolutely.
Aha.
And from there, he was described by his secretary who followed him, a guy named Walter Hooper, as the most converted man he had ever met. So his Christianity, his conversion just worked into every part of his life and certainly into his writings.
I think that's because he was so skeptical, cynical about faith ahead of that. So when he did convert, he went big.
He went big all the way through. And again, in his 30s, which means that he went through a lot of life things before that.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in World War I. He was in the trenches. He was actually injured in World War I. I read a quote somewhere, something to the effect that he was scared in World War I, but he never sank so low as to pray.
Oh.
He was pretty anti-God until he reluctantly, the most reluctant convert, came to God, came to know Jesus Christ, and his life was never the same, and we see that through his works. It's interesting that he didn't really start to write successfully till after his conversion. We have some of his writings from before then, a lot of letters, a poetic work called Dimer, which most people can't get through, and I haven't yet. He wrote a number of poets, something called a cycle of lyrics. Some of them I enjoy. Really, his great work came out after his conversion.
Yeah, I don't know any of those.
Probably okay. Not the place to spend most of your time.
So maybe that's good. He put some of those under a different name.
Indeed. Also, one of the fun things about him is what a good friend he was to so many people and to so many great names in literature. J.R.R. Tolkien and he were pretty close for a long time. A lot of people have heard of the writing group called the Inklings that often included C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, also included other great writers, including Jack's brother Warnie. Charles Williams, who I am sure we will talk about his books at some point, and many, many others. He was also good friends with a number of female authors of the time, including most famously Dorothy Sayers, and just incredible man.
You got to say Owen Barfield.
Owen Barfield. We could talk much about Owen Barfield.
Just
I'm
in mention of
confused
the
by
Inklings.
him. Absolutely. Owen Barfield. There's absolutely again.
You can't
Interesting
stop.
man. And yeah, we'll talk about him more. I have no doubt.
Were there other people in the Inklings? Those are the names I know.
There were something like 19 that would cycle through. There were the regulars. C.S. Lewis was the one that was basically always there. His brother Warney was usually always there, and then during different periods, different ones would come through at various times.
That's interesting to me. I read a biography of Winston Churchill and his time, and it just seems like for a long period of time in the UK, that was a thing. Men's clubs or where they'd get together, and clearly there were some women included sometimes, but where they'd get together and talk about things of interest to them, what books or literature or current events or I don't know, anything.
C.S. Lewis talks about kind of the change in education that occurred over his lifetime. So he was a teacher. He worked at Oxford at Magdalen College. It's spelled Magdalen, but apparently they pronounce it Magdalen. I don't know. For many, many years before he then transitioned to Cambridge, where he was awarded a chair and again was at a Magdalen College, but Magdalen College, Cambridge, not Magdalen College, Oxford. But he describes this change that tends to happen. He says that when he started, the way education kind of worked was a few guys getting together around a paper or around a topic and just hashing it out into the night. And then over time, that developed into more of the lecture type model that we see today, where there would be a professor lecturing to a lot of students. And he really kind of did lament that change.
Anything else on C.S. Lewis you want to mention?
So much more I want to mention, but I'm going to cut it short because we need to get to the story.
All right. So I'm going to say, and now, time for a story.
The book we will be reading today is The Great Divorce. On the back of my version, it has the catchphrase, the timeless novel about a bus ride from hell to heaven. And yes, it is that weird. So, with no further ado, here is my short summary of the plot. The author finds himself in a gray town at twilight, misty, cold, and with very few people around. He eventually sees a line for a bus, and so he gets in it. The bus takes him and other citizens through the air to a bright and dangerous country, where those on the bus are ghostly and ephemeral compared to the reality of the landscape. The rest of the book is a series of vignettes where the bright and solid inhabitants of the country interact with the ghostly individuals from the bus. The bright inhabitants offer them the choice of staying and moving further into life and reality into this bright country. Lewis eventually meets his hero and teacher, George MacDonald, who helps him understand what is happening. Through these encounters, Lewis explores various choices which would cause someone to actually choose hell over the joys of heaven. The story ends with a twist that I won't give away now, but we'll talk about at the end.
You know, it took me a long time to read this book because of the title, The Great Divorce. This is probably my third time through, but initially it just sounded like a bummer. Like we were talking about a massive heartbreak or something, and it is that in the end, but it's actually a lot more than that. So when did you first read it?
Probably in middle school. It was on our bookshelf, I think. As one does. I think Mom had it there, and I grabbed it and read it, and it blew my mind because I had no idea what this was going to be about.
And it's bizarre.
And it is bizarre. It is so strange, but in a beautiful way that allows us to look at reality differently and allows us to look at our lives and our choices differently. To me, this is the definition of kind of the Celtic mindset.
What do you mean?
So when I go to fairyland, what you see is the world just the same, but slightly skewed. You still see the grass, you still see the trees, but all of a sudden there's a fairy behind it. All of a sudden the grass might be poison or it might be healing. It's looking at real things, but seeing them askance in such a way that you can learn from them and get more beauty and wisdom out of them.
I mean, that sounds allegorical to me, since we talked about allegory.
There is much about that, and there are those who would call this an allegory.
I saw he got nettled by allegory and said it was a supposition,
An
which seems like semantics.
imaginative supposal. Actually, I think those are a key distinction. Remember that with an allegory, it's all about controlling what the reader gets out of it. It's all about saying this stands for this so that the reader is caged into following you along with the message you're trying to relay. That was not what Jack was trying to do here. What Jack did was he had this imaginative supposal, and then he ran with that and then painted a picture that we can watch and gain what we choose to gain out of it, or what we can gain out of the different vignettes and conversations.
Yeah, I read where he specified that it's not supposed to be a literal description of what he or anyone should think of what it looks like when you die, but it is a vision, a supposal, if we're going to go with that, of what it could be like or something we could learn from that.
That has actually been a barrier to a lot of people reading this. I have known many people, family and friends, who have said, well, I never really got into that, or I tried it, but I don't think that's what it's like after we die.
They never got off the bus?
They never got off the bus.
That'll make more sense later.
So
we'll talk about that too.
C.S. Lewis, I think, anticipated this. And so in his premise, he wrote on this. And so I'm going to quote him here, and I think that'll help guide our discussion.
Sure.
Quote, I beg readers to remember that this is a fantasy. It has, of course, or I intended it to have, a moral. But the transmortal conditions are solely an imaginative supposal. They are not even a guess or a speculation at what may actually await us. The last thing I wish is to arouse factual curiosity about the details of the afterworld.
Well, then let's get into it. So we start, you mentioned the gray town.
The gray town.
How do you think of the gray town? What does it make you think of?
I think of a big city or like a factory that's abandoned because it's empty. That's one of the primary things he notices about this. It's all kind of grimy, kind of gray. There's no real color popped up on it. And he doesn't see very many people around, if any people around, until he gets to the bus line.
Yeah. So he waits in line with everybody else. And then really our first demonstration of what's going on there is from the people in the bus line. And just as I read through it, and it's short, it's just a chapter, I wrote down all of the different types of behaviors he sees just in the bus line, because he's worried, because he's at the end, like, oh no, maybe I won't get a spot. But I wrote down passive aggressive, physically aggressive, snobbery, cheating. There's people being pompous, judgmental, selfish, self-important. There's self-pity. There's blame. I mean, he goes on, and it's in one quick section looking at these people in a bus line. And so quickly, the line gets shorter. Because apparently it's not nice to stand in this line.
One of the things that captured me about this book from the beginning is that it made me laugh.
Yeah.
As he's moving up the line. There's these terrible things happening, right?
All
people
around
being
him.
punched out of the line, people being taken advantage of, arguments. But in his head, he's like, oh, I get to move up a space
Yeah, up
as
one.
one person goes out.
That's right.
Yeah, as they're waiting for the bus. So then the bus comes, and the bus is such a striking picture. He describes it as heraldric. I don't even think I pronounced that right, but
Go with it.
but glorious and colorful and real. So there's this difference between the gray town and the light and color and reality of the bus and of the bus driver.
Yeah, they hate the bus driver. That part got me to chuckle a little bit. They're like, that guy, oh man. They don't like him
They
at
don't.
all.
And the impression you get is that they feel small and less. You know, that guy's obviously full of himself. He's so proud. Who does he think he is, kind of thing.
Yeah, where he's described as just kind of happy and glowing. He looks healthy and wonderful in comparison to this gray town and the angry people in it.
And it also describes it saying as he looked like a guy with a job to do.
Yeah.
So what is the job? The job is to convey the passengers on this bus. So they all get on the bus and the bus starts to leave. And then this is really where the vignettes start. This is where the conversations with different people start. And I'm going to restrain myself from just reading this book because every one of these conversations has truth and beauty and humor, and you can really learn from it. What I hope we get out of this is that I encourage you all to open this book and read it for yourselves. I also would strongly encourage you, if you are intrigued, the Pints with Jack podcast
Hmm.
does an incredible step-by-step journey through this book where they really do a deep dive through it. And so cannot recommend it highly enough. But for us, let's get on the bus and let's see what happens next. So who does he meet when he gets on the bus?
Well, a few different people, but I want to point out, you mentioned the conversations that happen in the vignettes. This whole book is either him in conversation with somebody on the bus or off the bus, or him observing conversations between other people's characters as it goes on. And so you learn pretty much everything there is to know about where they're going through these conversations. As you learn everything we learn about the Gray Town through these conversations. So the tussle-haired youth,
Mm-hmm.
go for it.
So the tussle-haired youth is a poet. He's a communist. He's a guy who is just a complainer. So throughout the conversation with Lewis, as he's sitting on the bus, Lewis learns about his life, and he talks about all these different things that have happened unfairly to him. In school, his father is giving him not enough of an allowance. The Russians came into the war on the side of the U.S., so they're not real communists. So he had to find another country where he wouldn't have to fight in World War I and could support communism. The school system was mean to him. So all these things kind of hit up, and it culminates in the end where he says, at the end, I finally just threw myself under a bus. And that's the first really weird part about this book.
Yeah, like, wait, what?
You threw, huh? And Lewis, the character in the book, reacts to that. He's shocked, but the tassel-haired poet is not. He is not shocked. He just keeps going. And this is where you start to realize that, okay, we're not dealing with Earth here. We're not dealing with normal life. There's something else going on.
This isn't just a bus and a bummer town, an empty town.
And one thing happens kind of in the midst of this conversation that also tells us that this just isn't a bus. The bus isn't on the ground anymore. The bus is flying. So very rapidly, you have Lewis in this world that's bizarre, getting on a bus for no reason that we fully understand, learning that at least the guy behind him or next to him that's talking to him committed suicide. And now all of a sudden he's flying on a glowing bus.
And not just flying, ascending, steeply ascending. They're going up.
One other thing while we're talking about the tassel-haired poet. There is a strong argument to be made that this is actually a self-insert of C.S. Lewis himself when he was a younger man.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He was a communist?
He dabbled with it. He was never a member, but if you read through some of his early letters, he talks about a sympathy with socialism. He never joined with any of these groups or anything that I'm aware of, but there was certainly a sympathy for it. And he lived for poetry, for writing poetry and for having people talk to him about it and getting it appraised and valued by other people. So you can just imagine the young C.S. Lewis pulling out this ream of papers for other people to listen to them and them shuddering because they just don't want to hear
the whole
him
time
talk about
the
it.
youth wants him to read his poetry, pushing the papers at him. So there's other people on the bus.
Including an intelligent-looking man with a bowler hat. This guy is pretty interesting. He actually starts to talk with the author about the mechanics of the town.
Yeah.
What is the Gray Town? How does it work? And he describes how, well, it's not surprising that people can't live together. They're just quarrelsome. But that's okay because in this Gray Town, anything you imagine happens. So you can just build a new house and you get further and further out. And he keeps talking about the growth of this town and how people are snarling and quarreling. And Lewis asked him about, well, can you meet people? I mean, old people or anything? And he talks about this trip that somebody did to go see Napoleon.
They found him.
They found him. It took him years to do it and to get back. And Napoleon had built a house in the emperor style and was basically pacing around just complaining and blaming other people for the loss of his empire.
Yeah, endlessly pacing back and forth, back and forth. The separation in the Gray Town is interesting to me, that they can't find anyone to be compatible with. They just get further and further. And at some point it says that you're taking care. There's no real needs there. They're not great, but you have what you need. And so if you need a new house, you get one. But then everybody keeps getting further and further from one another. They're self-isolating.
Mm-hmm. Which leads into why the intelligent-looking man is on the bus. He actually has a goal
He's got a
on the
plan.
bus. He's got a plan. His whole argument is that scarcity is what drives community. If he had something real, something solid, then people would want it. There'd be a demand, and he could start a store, and people would have to live near him in order to buy it. And he has this great plan of how community is going to develop. But this triggers a question in our author who asks, well, if you can have whatever you want just by imagining it, if you can build a house, why would you need anything real? And the answer is intriguing. The answer says, well, people would really like something that can keep off the rain.
Hmm.
Apparently these houses don't actually work.
Right.
Apparently they're fake, almost imaginary, and they don't guard against any real thing. And so the author naturally asks, well, why would you make these then? The answer comes back in a very hush, very quiet tone. Well, nobody wants to be outside when it gets dark.
Yeah, right now
When
it's
this
gray.
twilight turns to night. And there's a lot of fear about what will happen when the twilight goes to dark. That then prompts another conversation. And so the next man he meets is described as the fat man or a cultured man. And so this guy has an interesting take on the town that's different from the gentleman that was just speaking. This was the man who thought that spirituality was the most important thing. And he disagreed that this was twilight moving into darkness. He believed this was dawn coming, that the light was going to come to this town. He describes it as a sublime thought. So you have this terrible town where nobody is happy, everyone's grumpy, it's just incredibly petty, but this man believes that because it's spiritual, it's actually a thing of beauty in some way, which is an interesting counterpoint to the other guy.
It is strange to think of people holding on to hope in hell.
Mm-hmm.
Like the hope that this is going to turn into the light. But these people are also on the bus for one reason or another. But I think this is a better question for later. But I am curious what you think about why would these people be on the bus in the first place?
I will absolutely get to that. I think there's another spot down the road, though, where we can answer that clear.
Yeah.
Right now, let's move into where is the bus going. So you said the bus was ascending. The bus was going up. And there's a massive cliff. And he goes to great lengths to describe this cliff as, greater than anything that we've ever seen. And then the bus comes out into a wide place. On the bus, there's a few other things I think are interesting. One, he tries to open a window.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. How do the other passengers react to that?
They hate it. They can't stand air, light, any of it. It's almost nauseating, toxic to them.
And then the other thing about the bus is the mirror. So the mirror on the front. Now, we grew up a ways from school. And
Long
so
bus
we
ride.
had long bus rides and many, many bus rides. Do you remember the mirror?
Oh, yeah. She could look at you.
Mrs. S.
Mrs. S, she could pierce you with her eyes in that mirror. And you knew it was you.
And you could always see yourself in the mirror. You could see others. The mirror kind of haunts me to this day.
Yeah.
What's fascinating about this bus, though, is that allows me to see this mirror that he describes. And what he describes is seeing all the other faces, and they were horrible. He describes them not as faces full of possibility, but as full of impossibility. They were fixed in these certain petty emotional states, and it horrified him. And what horrified him even more was he saw his own face.
Yeah.
That
He doesn't
was
say
also fixed.
what it looks like, but yeah, that he sees his own face in the mirror.
So the bus gets up into this wide, bright area with the mountains in the distance, the high country in the distance. And the way he describes it, it's like a beautiful national park with grass and trees and a river and all sorts of things. But this is the next really weird thing that happens. And so let me describe what happens when the author sees these fellow passengers as they get out of the bus. I gasped when I saw them. Now that they were in the light, they were transparent, fully transparent when they stood between me and it, smudgy and imperfectly opaque when they stood in the shadow of some tree. They were, in fact, ghosts, man-shaped stains on the brightness of the air. One could attend to them or ignore them at will as you do with dirt on a window pane. I noticed that the grass did not bend under their feet. Even the dewdrops were not disturbed.
I think man-shaped stains is an excellent descriptor.
Mm-hmm. So there they are, ghosts. They can't even bend the grass. And in fact, he talks about even walking on the grass is painful to them. The light is penetrating to them. Everything is so much more real and more light and more actual than anything that they've experienced before that they can endure. They are ghosts in a land of reality. And a lot of them can't handle it. Some of them run right back onto the bus. Others start kind of responding in different ways. And it's a striking scene.
He's noticing this about the other passengers, but he looks at his own feet and he can't see his own. And he notices the pain of walking. And I think it's right there where they talk about how difficult it is to walk.
Yes.
Where the pain of it, they're not strong enough. They have no strength there. They have no imprint on anything around. They have no substance at all in this light, beautiful new place.
So one of them asked the bus driver, "Hey, when do we have to come back?" And the bus driver responds, essentially, "You don't have to come back at all if you don't want to." So you have these ghosts now flittering around the bus, hanging out. It hurts to walk. It hurts to do anything. What are they going to do? And this is where the next thing happens in the plot point. The bright spirits come. And as we talk through the rest of this, I'm going to often use the word ghost and spirit, but I mean them very differently. The ghosts are the passengers on the bus, the not real ones, whereas the spirits are the people of the land. And let me read this passage to you. Long after that, I saw people coming to meet us. Because they were bright, I saw them while they were still very distant. And at first, I did not know they were people at all. Mile after mile, they drew nearer. The earth shook under their tread as their strong feet sank into the wet turf. A tiny haze and sweet smell went up where they had crushed the grass and scattered the dew. Some were naked, some robed. But the naked ones did not seem less adorned, and the robes did not disguise in those who wore them the massive grandeur of muscle and the radiant smoothness of flesh. And so these are the bright spirits coming to meet those who came on the bus.
Yeah, and they are strong. And on this read through, I really got how much joy they each have. They're always smiling. They're always glowing with joy. They're strong. They're confident. Near dancing, it mentions that several times. They understand more and they're kind. It often mentions them smiling as they talk to the ghosts. These bright spirits come, and each ghost has one.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one for each ghost that has come up.
As the bright spirits find their target, they find the ghost, and this is where the conversations really start. So the first conversation we have, and we're only going to be able to touch on these. We're going to mention some of the highlights, but these conversations go for pages. And the skill and artistry with which C.S. Lewis does these conversations amazes me because it is really hard to write dialogue, and he does it well, and the pages fly by. So there's a big man he finds who keeps talking about what a good man he was, how he only wants his rights, and that he doesn't have his rights. The bright spirit that comes to meet him is somebody he knows. It is a guy who used to work for him that ended up killing somebody else who worked for him.
A known murderer.
A known murderer comes up to him, and the big man just can't understand why the bright spirit is up here in this place and he is not. And the bright spirit, in a winning and engaging way, keeps trying to explain, you may end up above me here. In fact, I have come to serve you, to help you on this journey into the mountains. But the big man just won't accept it, can't see that, and eventually rejects the offer of help and goes back to the bus.
Yeah, so I have a few things on that. So it's funny to me, all these ghosts really hate the light, but they want it. There's a piece of them that pulled them onto that bus. There's a piece of them that brought them there out of the gray town, but they can't stand the light. And so they have both in them, but his spirit tells him, and this is a quote, "Only be happy and come with me. Everything is here for the asking and nothing can be bought." Because the ghost, he's like, "I've earned this. I've always worked for it. And these are my rights. I only want that." But he says, nothing can be bought. And the murderer, who's now a solid person, has this understanding. He says, "I have given myself up. It's the only way. Once you do so, you get something far better."
Mm-hmm.
The ghost learns that his solid person wants him to come with him. And so he uses it. The line is, it was almost happy. The ghost was almost happy now that it could, in a sense, threaten. And he says, I'll go home. Hell is home in his mind. He doesn't want to go extend. He doesn't want to go with him. But the really interesting part to me is that the ghosts can't impact the spirit's joy. The spirit is there for him. And they talk later about how far they each come to serve them in this way. And yet when they choose to leave, when they don't choose to step forward into the light, and because the spirits want to help them learn to walk, help them become strong and know even more about this land. When they don't choose that, it doesn't wreck the spirit's joy in any way. And I think there's a lot of depth there, and it happens over and over and over in these stories.
I think there's a ton of depth to that. And I think that comes out very clearly in a few of the other conversations that come up toward the end, because it's a recurring theme throughout all these discussions. At this point, the narrator is still pretty confused.
Yeah.
So we now kind of get it that the gray town is hell and that where they're at now is sort of the anteroom of heaven. But the narrator doesn't really know that yet, but I think wheels are starting to turn. It's with the next solid person that I think it really clicks for him, because the next solid person is the Episcopal ghost or the clerical ghost. So
I named him the apostate preacher. Yeah, funny. We each named the vignettes in our own words. So there's similarities, but they are complex. So
some of the characters actually have names, but even when they do, I tend to label them by their characteristics and not by the names they're given.
Yeah, descriptor. Yeah.
So the clerical ghost is an apostate. He was a bishop in the Church of England, obviously, as you go through it, and he's meeting up with the solid person who is a former pupil, comrade, student of his. And so they dive into this fascinating theological conversation where the ghost is essentially arguing that I thought things, I honestly thought them, and therefore I'm good because I fearlessly and honestly thought them. And the solid person keeps responding back, well, wait a minute, why did you think them? What you thought wasn't true. It wasn't right. And he walks through this, again, beautiful, elaborate discussion between the two of them. And over the course of the discussion, you see this veering of the two, where the solid person is trying to bring him to reality, trying to bring him to fact, trying to bring him to God, trying to bring him to heaven, a place where he talks about being able to drink truth, right? I mean, just an incredibly beautiful picture. But the clerical ghost, the Episcopal ghost, just isn't interested in that. He is all about intellectual discovery, thinking through things. And so he's not looking for fact. He's looking for basically the ability to just talk through stuff. And eventually it becomes clear that they're not going to come to a common ground, and they end up parting and separating ways.
Yeah, and the spirit does say, that's hell. And the preacher said, well, don't be profane. I really like it where he says, call it hell, but it's purgatory if you choose to leave. So for those who stay there, it is hell. But if you choose to leave and come with your spirit guide, the person who came for you, then that's purgatory. It's something you're leaving behind you as you move on.
Yeah.
So it's all about your choice. Which way do you go?
All about the choice. And choice will be a recurring motif throughout the rest of this.
Yeah. And the quote I wrote is, when in all our whole lives did we face in solitude these questions, choosing to listen to the small voice inside them that really speaks truth? You know, if you're always talking, how can you listen?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't mind you saying it. Go for it.
There's then a little bit of a detour after this particular encounter where, remember, walking on the grass hurts. Everything is solid. There's a scene where the narrator reaches down and tries to pick a flower, and he can't do it. The flower is so hard, so solid, so real that he skins his hands just
hurts.
trying to pick the flower. He tries to pick up a young, tender beech leaf, and he says it weighed more than a sack of coal. He was able to lift it off the ground, but he said it almost cracked my heart to do so. And so the reality around here is intimidating. I mean, if you can't even pick up a leaf, if you can't pick a flower, that's scary. And then what does he see but lions?
Yeah, what's
running
with the
by.
lions?
He sees lions playing and gambling. And then he ends up coming to a river. And the river is beautiful and smooth. And he kind of does an aha moment where he thinks, well, I can walk on the grass and not bend it. Can I walk on the water? Spoiler, he does. So the water is smooth and fast flowing, and he walks on it.
Well, he falls down first.
Several times,
Yeah.
yes. But it doesn't hurt his feet when he's walking on the water. But as he's walking, he gets closer and closer to a waterfall. And so the water starts breaking up. There start to be waves coming at him, which he describes as, hitting him like boulders. And so he ends up crawling off of the water onto the land. And that's where he comes up with his next encounter.
Wait, what's with the lions? Why lions?
Because there is life everywhere in this land.
Thriving.
And not just weak life, but powerful life, strong life. This isn't just a land for mice. This is also a land for lions. And that's cool.
That's good. Good job. All right, the waterfall.
The waterfall and the scene around the waterfall. So as he's coming out of the water and he's now on the land, he sees one of the ghosts. At first, he thinks it's just one of the shrubs, but he sees it, then it's moving. And he sees the intelligent man with the bowler hat, the guy who was trying to bring something real back to the gray town. And he's scared. The guy in the hat is hiding. He's going from kind of bush to bush. He doesn't want the light to shine on him, but he's heading towards this great apple tree, which is described in picturesque terms. And around it, golden apples. And around it, there's these flowers and things. And he talks about how it's like an anti-tank trap, because he can't walk over these. When the wind blows, they're moving and shifting. If he gets something pinched between leaves of a daisy, it'll crush him. And as interesting as this guy keeps moving to the tree, but then there's a gust of wind and these apples fall from the tree. So this cluster of them comes around him. And you can see, once he recovers from the pain of having these apples fall on him and almost crush him, what he then tries to do. So I'm going to read. He lay whimpering, nursing his wounds, but soon he was at work again. I could see him feverishly trying to fill his pockets with the apples. Of course, it was useless. One could see how his ambitions were gradually forced down. He gave up the idea of a pocketful. 2 would have to do. He gave up the idea of 2. He would take 1, the largest one. He gave up that hope. He was now looking for the smallest one. He was trying to find if there was one small enough to carry. And I love that picture of trying to find something on reality. And then the next line is among my favorite in the whole book. The amazing thing was that he succeeded.
He did it.
He was able to pick up an apple
little one.
Carry it inch by inch slowly away, trying to take it back to the bus.
And think of the conviction you'd have to have that this is worth something.
Indeed. But how much do we see that in the lives around us, where people who have goals that maybe don't align with what we would think would be a good thing, but the work they put into it, how much they're willing to do, just heroic levels of work for what? To try and carry an apple back to a bus.
Yeah, it's a fixation for sure.
Mm.
But then the waterfall speaks.
The waterfall speaks. He realizes the waterfall is still a waterfall, but it's also an angel. He talks about it being an angel forever pouring itself out. And the angel says to this guy, fool. He flat out calls him a fool. Put it down. It won't fit in hell. He says, stay. He says, the land will teach you how to eat these apples. But the man doesn't.
Do you think he heard the waterfall? It doesn't say C.S. Lewis heard the waterfall.
That's a really good question. In a lot of Lewis, there are beings and people who speak that are not heard the same by everyone. There's a quote in, I believe, The Magician's Nephew that says, what you see or hear depends an awful lot on where you're standing and what kind of person you are. And so it's very possible that he did not hear the waterfall.
Yeah, he just keeps going. So. But then it's awkward because C.S. Lewis is standing by a giant angel waterfall. And I like how he kind of trickles off. He's like, I'm out.
Yeah, I can't do this. I can't handle it.
Can't stay here.
But then he meets another ghost who is one of my favorites as well. I mean, they're all my favorites.
What'd you name him?
The hard-bitten ghost.
I said the hard-bitten traveler, but yes.
So what strikes you about the traveler?
I thought it's funny at the beginning of the description, he says that he's the kind of guy he would have thought reliable. He seems reliable. But he's been everywhere and he's seen it all. Very much a cynic. Everyone has an agenda. There's an agenda to where they are. There's an agenda to where they've been. Everyone's colluding. He's just very calm about everything, but cynical, very jaded.
I've seen it all. I've done it all. I've been there. It's all a flop.
Made me think of Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun. He's already seen it.
And it's interesting to me how the narrator keeps asking questions.
Yeah.
Because the guy will say, I went to Peking. And the narrator, what was that like? I went to the Taj Mahal. What was that like? There's still this desire, this curiosity in the narrator that this ghost just does not have. He's done it and above it all. It's all beneath him. It's all boring. There's no point to any of these kinds of things. Then the narrator asks him, well, what would you do if you could? Right? I mean, if all this is worthless, what would you like to do? And I think this is fascinating because the ghost responds back. He runs with this. There you go, said the ghost with a certain triumph, asking me to make a plan. It's up to the management to find something that doesn't bore us, isn't it? It's their job. Why should we do it for them? That's just where all the parsons and moralists have got the thing upside down. They keep on asking us to alter ourselves, but if the people who run the show are so clever and so powerful, why don't they find something to suit their public? All this poppycock about growing harder so that the grass doesn't hurt our feet now. There's an example. And he just keeps going off on this, how everything is somebody else's job to make it good, to make him happy, but he's just not satisfied with anything at all.
Yeah, and unwilling to even try to come up with a solution. Like, what might that be like? Nope, he's seen it. He's over it.
To the point where the hard-bitten ghost ends up asking the narrator, so you going to go back to the bus? And the narrator's response is, well, on your showing, it doesn't really seem to matter whether I go or not. So there's certainly a depression that comes out of the cynicism right here.
That's what I took, is that it's contagious. He's jaded, and it's really the first thing that makes Lewis afraid. He gets bummed out, and then he gets afraid because he mentions that, imagine if it rained here. What do you think that raindrops would do to you? Did you think of that? And then he does think about that, and he's scared. So he's sitting there just kind of bummed out now. Changed the flavor entirely.
Yeah, definitely down. There's one more ghost he sees, and this is a very embarrassed, very shy, very timid ghost. So this is a woman who basically feels that to be ghostly in the presence of these solid spirits is worse than being naked.
Yeah.
They're looking through her. They're looking into her. And she just can't handle it. She can't get out of her own head. She can't get out of her own mind. She can't think of anything but herself. Do you remember what the solid spirit does to try to crack her out of herself?
Yeah, this one's jarring to me.
Keeps getting weird.
Oh my gosh. He's like, well, there's only one thing left to do because she just can't get past her own physical ghostness. So he's like, one thing left. And the idea is, well, I won't tell you why he does it, but he blows a horn to call a herd of unicorns to come trampling through. And C.S. Lewis does not see what happens to her at that moment. He
runs from the stampeding unicorn. I gotta admit,
scary.
I'm visualizing Ron Burgundy with the conch shell as he's summoning the news team on Anchorman.
Team assemble.
A little bit of that going on. But yeah.
But she's so scared. This did not seem kind to me. I said that the spirits are always kindly, but he is going in extremis here. Like, well, you can't get over it. This is what we're going to do. We're going to try this. So
certainly an extreme tactic. He's trying to get her to run to him and to come out of herself. But as you said, he also makes the narrator run like mad.
Yeah, then Lewis doesn't know that yet. He's like, I don't know why that happened, but he's out. He's going. So we learn about that more.
The running ends up being a good thing because he then encounters
the teacher.
George MacDonald, great man, great author, and this is where the narrator has his own fanboy moment. Mm-hmm. He starts going off on how much George MacDonald meant to him. He talks about buying his copy of Fantastes at Leatherhead Station and what it meant. And then what does George MacDonald do as he's rattling like this? He shuts him down. He puts an arm on him and says, basically, son, your love, all love is precious to me. But it might save us some time to let you know I already know all this.
Just hush.
And then he corrects him. He's like, actually, your memory failed you on a few of those particulars, but that's not why you're here. Then they start actually talking. And this is where he starts to get answers because the teacher is there.
Yeah, before this, they're really kind of one at a time interactions, and then he kind of roams on and really doesn't have an idea. But once he meets George MacDonald, he starts to learn things, and George MacDonald helps him walk. He says, lean on me. So it'll still hurt, but it's going to get better.
So I think this is a good point to talk about the imaginative supposal. What is really going on here? Because George MacDonald finally brings it up. He says, have you never heard of the refrigerium?
I hadn't. Nope.
He then says, somebody with your abilities reading would likely have come across it in Prudentius, or at least in Jeremy Taylor.
Sure. Yeah. He probably had. He's that kind of guy.
Well, he did. His response was, I seem to remember something about it, but I don't remember exactly. And the response comes back essentially, the damned can take holidays.
Mm-hmm.
They can take excursions, pleasure trips, if you will. So in this case, they're on the bus taking the pleasure trip to heaven. He describes other ones, right? People will go back to houses they used to own and try and assert ownership, and you call it a haunting.
Right.
He talks about literary ghosts going to libraries and hanging out to see if anybody is checking out their books. He talks about some that go and just play pranks on like mediums and spiritists and those sorts of things. So you get the impression that they can go to different places, but one of the places that they can go to heaven. And this really is what C.S. Lewis took out as the imaginative supposal on which he based all this.
Mm-hmm.
What if the damned could take vacations to heaven? And if they could, would they stay if given the choice? So I did some homework on this. Prudentius, in case anybody is wondering, is a 5th century Christian poet who wrote in Latin. In his Hymn for the Lighting of the Lamp, he states the following line. And the guilty spirits, too, in their crowds, often have holiday from punishments in hell, on the night on which the holy God returned to the world of men from the waters of Acheron. What the hymn is and what the poem is essentially describing the power of the resurrection. So when Christ died and rose again, there's a classic teaching of a harrowing of hell where he descended into hell and brought souls up with him. And in the hymn, there's this idea that that's so powerful that once a year on Easter, souls can continue to come out of hell. Now, there's really nothing to compare with what C.S. Lewis did with this, but that's where he kind of got the idea. Jeremy Taylor, I believe, was the one who actually used the word refrigerium, which sounds a lot like refrigerator. Same root. It's the idea of a cooling. There's also a sense of refreshing. So think of it like a holiday or a vacation. So this is it. This is what it's all based on, right? Can the damned leave? If they were to come to heaven and given the opportunity, would they stay or not? And we've already seen multiple situations where they chose something at the expense of heaven, where they weren't willing to stay.
And Lewis asked George MacDonald, does anybody pick to stay? And he references Emperor Trajan. Emperor Trajan chose heaven. So there's one. Somebody did, which is great. Most of these stories, they don't.
The Trajan story is pretty cool. Trajan was an emperor. He was renowned for being fair and just and good. There's folklore that Gregory the Great essentially baptized him posthumously, and he made his way into heaven. If you read through Dante's Paradiso, the third part of the Divine Comedy, Trajan is one of the saved spirits in heaven, even in Dante.
Oh, I told you I didn't get through Paradiso. Paradise took a little bit. Whew.
It's a challenge.
So they do talk quite a bit, and he answers a lot of Lewis's questions. Something I thought was really beautiful. He says, both good and evil, when they are full grown, become retrospective. That heaven once attained will walk backwards and turn even agony into glory. But hell's the same. So I took that as your experiences on earth or in purgatory, hell, and in heaven. Once you make your choice, it works backwards into your life. So the things that were hard then, you see the blessings in them. You see it, how it affected your life to the point that you'd make the choice for heaven.
Mm-hmm. I think is one of the most profound keys to take away. And I only took one philosophy class when I was in college, but one of the things I remember was the philosophy teacher, his professional work was in the world of morals, moral choices. And we were going over a lot of kind of classical philosophy. And again, this was a 101 class, but he started talking a little bit about his work in morals. And what he said was that we've kind of moved on from making arguments. So in modern moral philosophy, it's not so much that you make an argument for this. What you do is you come up with a story that demonstrates it.
Hmm.
And so we see this over and over again in these vignettes, is these stories that are demonstrating moral theological arguments and done in a winsome way.
They are winsome. And what's really beautiful about them is that you can see yourself in, at least a few of them, or you can see people you know or have cared about. They're very people things. And there's all kinds of different people, ghosts, who come up here and they have something that they can't let go of enough to choose heaven.
As he's talking with George MacDonald's, they do take this opportunity to hit some of kind of the heavy hitters in terms of theology. They start going into things like predestination and free choice and free will. And I love George MacDonald's response. He responds, "You cannot fully understand the relations of choice and time till you are beyond both, and you were not brought here to study such curiosities. What concerns you is the nature of the choice itself, and that you can watch them making." And so I think that's the key to what we're seeing here. Again, I don't think Lewis is trying to project a description of the afterlife. I don't think he's trying to answer a lot of these subtle theological mysteries. I think he's trying to highlight the choice for goodness against goodness, the choice for heaven or for hell. And I think he does it well.
Yeah. I wrote down, the ghosts always have something they insist on keeping, even at the price of their own misery. He also talks about how heaven is the real reality and hell is our self-created mind dungeon. We are trapped in our own thinking when we can't snap out of that. Even the ashamed woman, she can't snap out of it long enough to even see a piece of heaven, let alone choose it.
Someday, I am sure we'll start doing some Charles Williams books. One of the books that he wrote is called Descent into Hell, and he describes this and pictures it so well, this interning, this idea of people becoming more and more entombed in their own mind and soul and heart until eventually it is literally hell that they descend into.
That's in here too. They talk about the grumble. The grumbler, where it starts with a grumble, it becomes who you are. It starts to define you. And so then you no longer have a grumble about something. You become defined by this lament, whatever it may be.
One other thing that I think is worth taking from kind of the philosophical, theological conversations with George MacDonald is, I'm not even sure I can do this justice. Read the book. It'll do it better. But
please. He means please.
Ultimately, George MacDonald says this: there are only two kinds of people in the end: those who say to God, "Thy will be done," and those to whom God says in the end, "Thy will be done." All that are in hell choose it. Carrying on from our conversation about that interning, I think that quote encapsulates what he's trying to say.
Yeah. We all, I think, like to think that we'd be people who choose good, choose the light, choose right. But he gives so many painfully realistic examples of people who don't. They don't go that way.
Well, let's go through. So there's a couple of these I think we can hit fairly quick because they highlight that point. So the grumbling ghost, as you talked about, can't accept heaven because they're a grumble.
I called it
what they
the
do.
Self-important ghost. Yep.
The painting ghost can't accept heaven because he's so in love with painting. Not what he's painting, not the light, not the subject, but the art of painting makes him run back to hell because he's been forgotten about and he's trying to be remembered as a painter.
Yeah, his spirit says that light was his first love, but it's been forgotten over time and replaced with something twisted, reputation or ego and that fear of being forgotten.
The controlling wife ghost, who goes over and over talking about what she did to serve her husband, where it's clear she just destroyed him over the course of his life. That one was painful to me. She
says how he made him work 13 hours a day. What was so wrong about that? She just focused on connections and reputation and really just sucked the soul out of the man. That one's a painful one to read. I mean, they all are to some extent, but it's interesting with her. Many of them go back to the bus. She doesn't. It says she snaps out to nothing. She's just fully consumed with this. I guess that's her identity, where she no longer gets the choice. I don't know.
Well, she chose. She is only willing to control. And when that's not given to her anymore, because they're not going to give her husband back so she can destroy him, there's nothing left to her after that all happens. And then The three final ghosts, I think, are in many ways the most profound. This next one, honestly, I don't even know that I can talk about it because it's such a poignant and such a sensitive thing.
The possessive mother.
The mother. I think
Mhm.
this is something you've really got to read it in its entirety, because if you try and pick pieces out of this, it's going to sound horrible. But taken as a whole vignette, I think it really highlights how love, or perceived love, can go wrong and can actually lead to darkness. And it's really well done. But I kept trying to think how I could talk about this, and I honestly don't think I can. Do you have?
It took me to another C.S. Lewis book, where The Four Loves,
Mhm.
where he talks about the affection, friendship, romance, and agape love are four. But he also talks about the counterpoint to each of those, where the counterpart to affection as a type of love is possession, and friendship and exclusivity are kind of a point counterpoint. Romance and obsession, and agape and enablement are the words I picked out. I mean, there's way more to that book. It's great.
Mhm.
So that's like the shortest possible version you could do of it. But for me, it's about right priorities.
Mm.
And so if you don't put God first, you can't love even your child perfectly. Loving the source of love makes all the other types of love come right.
Yeah, I think that's a really good approach. In that vein, I guess the other book that could also highlight this a bit more fully is another C.S. Lewis book, Till We Have Faces.
Absolutely. I'll jump on board. It's a great book. Love it. It's my favorite.
That also hits this theme very, very strongly.
Yeah,
so.
where in that one, she loves her sister very much. And there's nothing fake or false about it, but it's wrong ordered. And in so doing, she inadvertently hurts her sister. And I think it's similar here, where by being possessive of her son and loving her son so much to the detriment of the others in her family. It is a sensitive one for sure, because mother love is wonderful, but it demonstrates how it can become an idol.
Yeah.
When it's taken out of order.
Yeah. The next ghost also goes into that line of disordered priority. So this is the ghost with the lizard. I love the ghost with the lizard. So there's this guy who's walking around, and he's got this red little snapping lizard on his shoulder that keeps making comments and stuff. He keeps turning to him and saying, basically, shut up. You can't say that here. You can't do that
Yeah, you can't say that here. Like, it doesn't belong here.
Yeah.
And he gets that.
It won't do. It won't do here. And this is one where it's not a solid person that comes up to him. It's an angel.
Yeah, it's the only one where it specifies an angel that approaches one of the ghosts.
And so the angel basically says, hey, what's going on? And he says, wow, this little guy, he's causing trouble. I'm going to have to leave. I'm sorry. And the angel says, well, do you want me to fix this? And the guy says, well, of course I want you to fix this. And he says, oh, good, then I'll kill it.
Yeah. And he goes in with the hands.
He's ready. And the ghost is like, whoa, 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 whoa. We didn't talk about killing this. And he starts rattling off every excuse in the book about how you can't do that. I need to go check with my doctor, all these different things.
And he does some it'll hurt.
Yeah. And as he gets closer, it hurts and hurts. And he says, you're going to kill me. And the angel says, it won't kill you. And he gets closer and it burns him. It hurts him. He said, well, I didn't tell you it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah. But he does say he can't kill it without the ghost's permission.
Mm-hmm. And he asks over and over, may I kill it? And the little lizard starts freaking out at one point here. He says, he can do it. He can kill me. You'll be without me. And he starts bargaining for his life with the ghost. But eventually he gives permission. The angel kills it. And what happens next?
Well, the man is remade.
He's remade.
He is reborn whole and glorious, as is the little red lizard. But the thing dies. Let's not miss that. It has to die for this to happen. But it comes back as this beautiful stallion. And they bond together, and then they take off like a shooting star. What a cool simile is that? Like a shooting star. But with the conversation with the angel, my favorite line is, this moment contains all moments, because he's trying to stall, making all the excuses. Like, I'll do it later. No, I'll take care of it later. This moment contains all the moments. So the choice you make right now, it's the same choice make at any point. This moment. Make the right choice this moment right now.
And he does. And the lizard likely is an allegorical representation of lust, or some other venial sin,
Very
some
vice.
physical sin, but is killed and then is reborn gloriously, as is the person. The other thing that I think about in this scene that always comes to my mind, do you suppose we should explain what a book plate is? Do you think people know what book plates are?
No, they're not common at all anymore.
So a book plate is essentially a name tag that you put in the front of a book. Usually it's a sticker and it's, this book owned by, or
Yeah,
you'll
like in an old library book, they'd have them.
from the library of sort of thing. Well, George MacDonald actually had a book plate that you can see and look up. And it's an anagram of his name that's written in Scotch that says, "Courage, God mend all." And at the bottom of it, there's this old wizened man walking basically into a door. It's obviously a tomb. And then above it is a young, vibrant man getting up from the earth and rising. And so you see this transition, right? This passage from death into life. And to me, I see that same thing in this scene. And I think Lewis, being a devotee of George MacDonald, I kind of think he was probably thinking the same thing too when he wrote this.
It's a good parallel. I hadn't thought about it. One more thing on this before we go to the last ghost, but the whole place, the land, the river, the trees, they all sing and vibrate with joy when this one ghost makes this choice to move on. And I just thought that was really cool how it's not just him and it's not just about him. It's about the whole together and it's all in joy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the last one, it's weird.
The last one is weird, but the last one is one of the few that actually extends over multiple chapters. So I call this The Great Lady and the Tragedian.
I called it the dwarf puppet thing.
Accurate.
That's the dwarf puppet thing. Sorry.
So the narrator in this setting sees or hears an entourage coming, and it's this parade of animals and spirits and children, and finally a great lady who is obviously a very important person. It's pretty funny. At first he's like, "Oh, is that?" Obviously wondering if it's Mary.
Is that Mary? But
the
he doesn't
mother
say
of
her
Jesus.
name.
Doesn't say her
is
name.
Is it Mary? No.
And he's like,
it's
no, but she is one of the great ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this idea of, again, one of the great saints, right? This great heroine of heaven who is coming up. And this woman with this entourage behind her approaches this stunted little dwarf who's holding on to this tall, seedy classical actor with a chain.
He's a puppet thing.
It's a puppet thing. And who is she talking to when she comes up?
The little dwarf.
The little dwarf. We find that the little dwarf was her husband, that they were married. And then you have this incredible scene where you see that the little dwarf, the little guy, is basically giving himself away to the tragedian.
Yeah, he's shrinking.
There's this second self that he's portraying himself as, and the woman keeps trying to bring him into joy, keeps trying to offer him heaven and joy and herself, and he's just not having any of it.
Yeah, I wrote self-pity for him. And so her entourage, it says that in her life, she's spread love, and so they honor her. And so she was a woman who shared with those around her, and these creatures and people are honoring her. But her husband is this shrinking, now dwarf of a man as he's giving himself away in this ritual of self-pity.
Mm-hmm. Until eventually he disappears, and the only thing left is the tragedian. And it's interesting in that scene where the woman then looks at him and says, "I don't know you, sir."
Yeah. Someone not choosing heaven can't steal her joy. And that bothers Lewis. And it kind of bothers me in the telling. But Sarah Smith is the name of the woman. And she says, "Here is joy that cannot be shaken. Our light can swallow up your darkness." And she's speaking to her husband. And he has moments where he actually looks at her, the dwarf, and there's moments where he thinks about coming up out of himself, and he becomes more substantial. He grows back a little bit, but no, at some point he gives it all away and becomes the puppet.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is the clearest example of the idea of hell not being able to infect heaven's joy.
Yeah.
Because after the dwarf and the tragedian are gone, you're right. The narrator is definitely troubled by this, and he asks, is it really tolerable that she should be untouched by his misery, even his self-made misery? And George MacDonald's response is, I think, good. Would you rather he still had the power of tormenting her? He did it many a day and many a year in their earthly life. And then the conversation proceeds down at the very end where he says, I hardly know, sir. What some people say on earth is that the final loss of one soul gives the lie to all the joy of those that are saved. And George MacDonald responds very simply, you see that it does not.
There it is.
You saw it. So that's the last ghost encounter. And one of the questions that's occurred throughout the book up to this point is the idea of why don't these great spirits, these solid bodies, come down and help the people in the town? Why don't they descend and clear out the town and help these people? And this is where we finally get the answer to that, because the narrator's asking, well, she didn't even go with him down into hell, right? She didn't take him even go back to the bus. And George MacDonald picks up a blade of grass and he points to a crack in the earth and he says, that's what you came up through.
That was the wall the bus ascended.
This great cliff is that small. He says that all hell is so small that it can't impact anything up here. It's not real. And it also means that that apple was never going to get through that crack.
Right. So do you want to talk about the chessboard? I'm confused by the chessboard.
The twist at the end. We said there's some twists at the end. So what happens is C.S. Lewis, the narrator, is visualizing all these things around him. And then it's as if he gets a different perspective, as if the camera pulls back and he's able to see this other level of reality where all these people, these individuals that are making these choices are like players on a board. He uses the word idolum, which is basically an idol or a character, a picture of these bigger characters that are then controlling the little characters. And then it goes further back and there's just bigger and bigger and bigger pictures. And I think what you see here is the concept that reality is bigger than we understand. It's bigger than we can grasp. There is more going on than just what's happening, for example, in these conversations. But these conversations also have an impact on these big things outside of it as well.
That's this moment is all the moments.
Is all the moments.
Yeah.
Yes. Then this is obviously a weird twist. I mean, up to this point, there's been strange things happening, but it's still a guy getting into a bus, walking around, talking with people. But then you have this weird Twilight Zone, end of 2001 bizarre thing that
it's
happens.
a weird ending.
And so what then becomes quite clear is that the teacher essentially tells him, you're not dead yet. You're not really here. This is a dream. This is a place for you to look at these choices, but this is not something you're supposed to go back and tell people this is what the afterlife is like. And so he makes it very clear that this is not a reality. This is a way to learn. And then it ends with the classic twist that the light comes on. So they've been in this land this morning. All of a sudden, the sunlight comes on, and the narrator is still a ghost. And so it pierces him. He talks about the light hitting him like golden bricks, intolerant of weight and edge. It is this avalanche of light and reality that he can't stand. And then he finds he's on the floor of his room, where he's pulled off a sheet from his writing desk and the books from his shelf has fallen on him, and he hears the air raid siren in the background because this is World War II. And so this was a dream. It was a vision. So Jody, what do you think about that kind of ending to a story?
I find it somewhat distasteful. In general, I think excellent books are very hard to end well. And it's not a great ending, but it doesn't have the resolution I like with a pretty bow on it. But there is so much to it and in it. I wondered if that meant that the gray town was going black If when the when the sun actually rises, if that's the moment, then
I think it is.
when
I
gray
think
goes
that's
to
when the
black.
night comes to the gray town
Mm-hmm.
and where day comes to the valley of the shadow of life, he
Yeah.
calls it. I don't think the plot is the strong point of this book.
No, it's the conversation.
conversations.
Yep, no doubt. So what would get someone on the bus?
I think a curiosity, an interest, maybe even a humility. A lot of these people that we see these conversations, you can see something that could be good in them.
Yeah, and George MacDonald would say is if there's even an ember inside the ghost, that will turn into something. That will turn into a choice. Because if you're in hell, you chose it. So if there's even an ember that wants heaven for real to give up themselves and go, they'll find it. I put down things like dissatisfaction or unease because the gray town, they're getting rained on. Nobody's is happy there. And also because there's someone, they each have a spirit who clearly they knew in their life. It's maybe a memory of love or light, some kind of prompting, even boredom, I think might get you there.
I think so. The narrator asks George MacDonald, well, will everyone make it to the bus? And his response is, all those who wish to will. And this quote, I think, is beautiful. No soul that seriously and constantly desires joy will ever miss it. Those who seek, find. To those who knock, it is opened.
So I have one more question and then we'll wrap it up soon. We're getting longer each podcast, brother. So what vignette, if you could add one or some, would you have liked to see here? Are there any? It's okay if there aren't. I'm just curious.
I'm not having one come to my mind. I'm curious what yours are. What are your vignettes?
Lewis asked MacDonald, does anybody choose to go to heaven? And one, the man with the red lizard, is the one we get to see in these vignettes. But all the others don't, or at least don't in this story. So I would have liked to see, I thought of a skeptic who learns to trust. They're basically the flip of the vignettes where they choose not to go, but it's self-reliant man who finally learns that he needs something else outside of himself. The bitter woman who chooses to forgive. I like this one. A perfectionist who learns to rest. Or I put the guilty man or an ashamed man who accepts grace. So I would have liked to see the flip side. And if anyone can write it well, it's C.S. Lewis.
Well, I think you might have a project there to try and write some of those yourself. 'Cause I love that. That's a great idea. One last thing that I wanted to go over real quick before we wrap up is the title, The Great Divorce. As you said, that kind of put you off to reading in this one. I didn't see anyone divorced in here. Where does that title come from? And it comes from another great work from William Blake called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. I don't understand that work. I've tried. It's a combination of poetry and art. It's beautiful, it's striking, it's stunning, and there are people who have dedicated their lives to studying it and love it. It's beyond me. I don't know what he meant, so I can't really argue with him on it. But what I think is in there is the concept that there's a little bit of hell in heaven, that you can't have heaven with just that little bit of darkness associated with it, that somehow gives it flavor or life or vitality. And so I think what C.S. Lewis was trying to write here was the direct repudiation of that you can't have hell in heaven. Again, not because it's too big, not because it's too gross, not because it's evil, but because it's essentially nothing. It just won't work in the world of reality. And so there is a line in the preface to this book that I think clarifies that. So C.S. Lewis says, if we insist on keeping hell or even earth, we shall not see heaven. If we accept heaven, we shall not be able to retain even the smallest and most intimate souvenirs of hell. And with that, I think we'll turn the page, and we hope you'll join us for the next chapter.
Thank you so much for listening. If you're willing, please take a moment to give us a 5-star rating and follow the Good Stories Podcast Facebook page. It only takes a moment and helps the algorithm wizardry that lets other people learn about our podcast. Thank you.